Before I begin this morning, I have to tell you this is going to be hard. I think both for me and for many of you listening. Some of the things that I'm going to say, I think, are a little bit heavy to hear and to visualize, but are important for all of us to understand. Let me just begin with a verse from our Torah portion from this morning. The Torah says, "Vaytrotetzu abanim bekirba, batomer imchen lama ze anochi." Rivka is struggling because the babies, the twins, are fiercely fighting in her womb. And she goes and says to God, why do I exist? If bearing children is going to be so hard, I know I wanted this very much. But if bearing children is going to be so hard, why do I exist? Why are you putting me through this? The last place we visited in Israel last week, this past Thursday morning, 2 days ago, it's a place called Machane Shufa, which is a little bit southern from Tel Aviv. And it really is, for all practical purposes, a military morgue where the bodies of fallen soldiers are brought to be prepared for burial. Now, there's an affirmation in Jewish law that says that if somebody dies for the purpose of Malchut, if somebody dies for the purpose of a war for our country, you do not need to perform a tahara. It is enough of a purification. So really, the only thing that is done to our soldiers is they put them in a coffin, because many times it is impossible to bury them if they're not in a coffin. You know, in Israel, the prevailing custom is to bury without a coffin. And as somebody who is in contact with death constantly, I have to tell you that as someone who has seen tragedy, has experienced tragedy with people, has embraced people who have had tragedy, being in that place is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my entire life, because the night before, we sponsored the dinner, thanks to many of you, thank you so very much. It was really like a Las Vegas-style buffet for a whole unit of reservists, and they ate it all. It was unbelievable. And they were like the people that come to shul with the Tupperwares, right? At the end of the dinner, we're putting it all in Tupperwares because they say the food in the army really does not compare to what we serve them. And I'll come back to the place where we do tahara for the soldiers, but let me just tell you what happened at that dinner. I walk in, and somebody comes up to me and says, "Are you from Las Vegas?" And I go, "Yeah." "You're Joshua's father. You're Felipe." I go, "Yeah, I'm Ben. I'm Joshua's friend." Now, this kid is huge, right? Huge. And he has a sling with his Tavor rifle, and he's, I said, "Ben, what are you doing here?" And he says to me, "Where do you think I was going to be? I live here." So we hugged, and we cried, and we had dinner, and we talked, and I'll come back to that talk in a second. But yes, Thursday when I was at that place in Machane Shufa, the only thing I could think of is that all of those soldiers were the age of my children. That's the only thing I could think of. And they showed us the rooms where the families spend some time with their children when they fall. And it was one of the most difficult moments of my entire life. Because this does not need to be happening. This is not something that we want. This is not something that we yearn for. This really is not something that we brought upon ourselves. I experienced a completely changed Israel from the last time I was there. I don't know if you recall, many of you were here when I came back during the summer. I had a really rough time. People were polarized. The country, I felt, was falling apart. And right now, as if somebody flipped the unfortunate switch, the unity that I experienced is the most incredible, powerful feeling that I have felt in my entire life. There is no more left. There is no more right. There is no more ultra-Orthodox. There is no more seculars. There's no more conservative. There's no reform. There's only Jews. It's really unbelievable. And when you meet these people and when they come and when you hug them and you say, you are not alone, they cry. It's not a cliche. They need us. We need them. We have forgotten what this felt like. They have forgotten what it felt like. The relationship between Israel and the diaspora had been tremendously severed. And this unfortunate switch of October 7th turned everything on its head. And it made us realize that just as much as they're fighting a war there, we are fighting a war here. And it's nothing less than a war. You know, walking through kibbutz Kfar Aza, there are no words to describe it. Let me try to share with you a couple of vignettes from kibbutz Kfar Aza, which I have very much in my mind. First of all of the bullet-ridden cars at the entrance of the kibbutz are still there. And these are no bullets like you see at the shooting range here in the United States, right? These are no 9mm. These are Kalashnikovs. And every single one of those casings that Hamas fired is marked in green by Hamas themselves. They want to make sure that we know what killed us. And you see them all over the place. When you walk through the gate of the kibbutz, you see a house completely destroyed, like rubble, burnt. And when they explain to us, and by the way, the person who guided us to the kibbutz is a young 24-year-old who lives in the kibbutz, who refuses to go to live in a hotel in Jerusalem, who says he's staying in his house. Nobody will build a monument, he says, in my kibbutz. We're going to rebuild, and we're going to live here again. That's the monument, which is incredible. And if you think about it, it is no different than the resilience of other generations of Jews that have faced horrible adversity. I was always puzzled by survivors of the Shoah who didn't want to go out and kill Nazis. They wanted to rebuild their lives. They wanted to become people again. And when that young man took us around, that's exactly the sense I got. But let me tell you about the first house that we saw. He explained to us that during the first, as we all know, 8 to 12 hours from 6 o'clock Saturday, October 7th, nobody came to help them. And when the army finally showed up in force, they had to show up with tanks because the terrorists had RPGs, they had very powerful explosives, and that house, there were about 20 terrorists inside, and they couldn't get them out with machine guns. So that house took fire from our own tanks. And as you walked along the kibbutz, here comes a really hard part. Every door, every house is marked with 2 markings. One by the army that tells you how many people died inside, how many people were alive inside, in 2 different colors. And then there's a sticker on the door placed there by Zaka, the National Chevra Kadisha of Israel. By the way, this time it was not only the ultra-Orthodox working on the Chevra Kadisha. They have people from all over the world, from Chevra Kadishas all over the world that came to help them. I found out about this too late, or I would have sent some of us from Las Vegas. I really would have. And every door is marked with a sticker of Zaka, signaling that they've cleansed that house, that all the fluids, all the pieces have been removed for burial. I stopped counting at 30 of the stickers because I didn't want to make myself even more depressed. By the way, all the time when we're walking through the kibbutz, it boom, boom, Israeli artillery every 30 seconds. We're wearing flak jackets and helmets, of course, because if an artillery misfires and falls on us, well, God forbid, right? And as we're walking around, we see active units of soldiers who are staying in the kibbutz. Soldiers were preparing to go out because Kfar Aza is really, you could see Gaza like I mean, it's closer than the Strip, for sure. I mean, it's like from here to Fort Apache. And all of this is just like a surreal landscape. We keep on walking, and they start explaining to us that when the terrorists came into the kibbutz, they knew exactly which houses to go to first. They wanted to kidnap people that were involved in the military at high ranks, or people who were involved in the Shabak, in the Sherut Bitachon Klali, in the security apparatus of Israel, and they wanted to kidnap them. When these people understood what was happening, they came out and they basically fought them so they wouldn't be taken alive. And the stories that I heard and the images we saw, right now, I cannot just tell you exactly what it was because we have children here. We kept on walking. And we came, I don't know if you heard the story of the two twins that survived and their parents were killed. So first of all, I had the tremendous fortune of holding one of those little babies in my arms. We went to Kibbutz Shfaim where they're staying, and we met the little babies, and they were there with their uncles and aunts, and were able to hug them and to kiss them. It was one of the most unbelievable feelings of my life. And when we were in the kibbutz, they explained to us why the baby survived. And I'm going to tell you why they survived, because we all need to know this. Those of us who believe that we're being too hard on the Palestinians, that Israel's committing war crimes, I need you to listen to what I'm going to say. They placed those babies in their cribs at the window of their house so that everyone could hear them cry. And when people would come to try to rescue the babies, they were shot. They shot 30 people on that spot, in the head. This is evil on a scale that we have not seen since the middle of the 20th century. And like I said before, our previous enemies tried to erase their crimes. These animals actually recorded everything they did. So, we didn't go to Kibbutz Be'eri because it was even a harder scene to witness. And I know Kibbutz Be'eri because a year and a half ago I was there with Liz. We were watching the kalaniot, the red flowers. And it was exactly through those fields where a car got stuck that the terrorists came in from Gaza. Now, one more thing that we all should know that I am not sure you pick up from American news. In the first hours of Saturday, the 7th, a lot of soldiers did come down to the south to help. But there was no organization. They came down in their own cars, they parked, they tried to find people they found from their own unit, and they got together and they started fighting, and that's how many of them got massacred. 300 soldiers died on that morning on Saturday. And here, I'm going to say this, and you need to know this because after the war is over, this is going to be something we're going to be talking about. For 7 or 8 hours in Israel, there was no government. We were almost stateless. Yes, the army was trying to organize itself. But it took the prime minister almost 12 hours to show his face. And there's still families of the hostages that have been unable to meet with a high-ranking minister. Blinken met with them. Biden met with them. But not people in our own government in Israel. This is not something I'm making up. This is something that's on the newspapers. Pick up Israel Hayom, the right-wing newspaper from Israel. It's in English. Read it. This makes the situation even harder. And the stories of heroism that you listen to, of those people that came down to help on that Saturday morning in their own cars, right? Armed with their Glock because they didn't have their rifles. They were not in the reserve at the time. Thanks to those people, we don't have 3,000 or 4,000 dead. We keep on hearing the stories of people that ferried 200 wounded people in their pickup, like they made 10 trips. I mean, these stories are unbelievable. But that's the bad news. And that's behind us. Yes, it will be there for a long time, like a ghost, like a specter that will never go away. I can assure you that. But moving forward, you're talking about a united people, about a strong people, about a people that will not be defeated. Many of you saw my post on Facebook about Ben, the lone soldier from South Africa, who was there's a unit now in the army that they have dogs, and they send the dogs in because they're afraid of the booby traps that Hamas is defending themselves in two ways. They first place booby traps, and behind the booby traps there's civilians, and behind the civilians there's Hamas. So for many years, they've been training with these dogs to look for the booby traps and to actually try to identify, right, who's behind the booby trap. This young man, Ben, sent his dog, whose name is Jack, and Jack literally fell on a grenade that was there to kill Ben. Ben was hurt severely. When we went to the hospital in Ashkelon, he was in a coma, and as we were about to leave the country, his father texted one of my colleagues that he was out of the coma, which was incredible. But you have to understand, anyone who thinks that we're just bombing these people discriminately needs to understand that we're putting our children not only in harm's way, we're sending them to die, trying to prevent many more of them being killed. Look, that place where that dog Jack went in, they could have taken out with a tank, but there were children inside. And one of our soldiers almost dies to protect their children. This is what the world doesn't know. This is what the world doesn't understand. Please, do not buy the propaganda. I'll tell you, I could speak for hours, but I'm not going to do it. I know we all have to go to lunch. I want to leave you with another vignette. We're driving towards Ashkelon. We're going to go to the hospital. I'll come back to this in a second. In the hospital, by the way, we met about 5 or 6 soldiers. One was, we don't know their last names. I know their names and their mother's names, right? Because I was writing the names down to do Mishe Beiraks for them. Naor Ben Dalia. Naor Ben Dalia is a 28-year-old kid who went into a house and was hit by fire from all sides. His vest saved him, but bullets still went through his hip. He was laying there, and there were 3 people from his unit, and his father was there. And he was about to be going to surgery. And we did a Mishe Beirak with him. We sang Kol Haolam Kulo, Gesher Tzar Meod. We all cried. They take him into surgery, and his father hugs us literally, as many as he could hug at the same time, and thanks us. He says, I cannot believe you came to see my son. And we said to him, how can we not come to see your son? He's like our son too. And this man, who was probably of Moroccan descent, right? We were all Ashkenazim, right? You understand what Israel's about, what the Jewish people's about when something like this happens, just melts in our arms, falls apart in our arms. Then we go to another room, and there's a young man by the name of Hanania. Hanania works as a mechanic during the year. He was called up, and he was not wearing a shirt, so we could see the sharpener holes in his shoulder. And he's there with his 3 little kids and his wife. And his parents come in, and we're trying to talk to him in Hebrew, right? And his parents say, hey, guys, we're from Chicago. So they are us, and we are them. There is not us and them. This is the most important thing for us to understand. And this conflict has changed the paradigm forever. I'm telling you, American Judaism will never be the same after this, at least for another 50 years. Going back to the bus going to Ashkelon. We're on the bus going to Ashkelon to the hospital, and suddenly we all get on our phones the alert. There's a siren. In Ashkelon, you have 30 seconds to find cover. We're in the middle of a road. There's no cover. The bus parks. You know how Israeli streets have this type of railings so that people don't cross the streets from the corners without the red light. So I try to jump, and I fall down. I get up. We're all running. We're going to the wall to lay down on the floor. And one of my friends, Rabbi David Kirshner from New Jersey, is like stuck in this moment, and he's saying, I can't believe this. Slightly different words, okay? I cannot say them in shul. How can they still have rockets? I mean, we're seeing Gaza on fire, and they're still shooting at us. How can they still have rockets? It's a rubble pile, and they still have rockets. And when Dad was sober, I went over to him and said, you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the Nazis and the death marches. Instead of fighting not to lose the war, they devoted everything they have to killing more Jews. Instead of protecting their people, they just wanted to kill more Jews. If Hamas would say today, okay, we give up, here are the hostages, it will all end. But no. They hate us more than they love themselves and their children. This is the bottom line. And this time I saw it in person, in 3D. It was not Golda Meir from a book. It was the sound of the explosions. By the way, those rockets, there were two, they actually did fall in open locations, but we heard the boom. Now, I don't want to scare you, because I also want to tell you that in no time, no minute, no moment when I was in Israel did I feel unsafe. Even when we were standing at the border with Gaza, I did not feel unsafe. You know, we actually felt so safe that we were taking pictures, and there was a group of soldiers that had to come and tell us, hey, rabbis, please, come and be behind the trees because you're too much in the open. And one of you is wearing an orange shirt, that was me. And I don't know. Who goes to the border with Gaza with an orange shirt? The guy from Las Vegas. And we do not want you to get hurt. So they moved us behind the trees. But even then, and there we met a Druze officer from the Israeli police who was recording videos in Arabic for social media. We met a whole unit of Bedouin soldiers, Muslim soldiers, who are even more enraged than we are. And you know what they said to us? You think it's hard for you to go and shoot and knowing that you may be killing their children? Imagine how we feel. But if we don't do this, they will come and kill our children because they already did. I mean, there is no logic. Israel has changed. Israeli Arabs. You know, I got in a cab in Jerusalem. And if you've been in a cab in Jerusalem, you know it's a very random exercise. You could be charged $10, you could be charged 300. So this driver starts talking to me, asks me where I'm from. We start talking. Clearly, he's not Jewish. Puts on the meter. Said, "You're going to put on the meter?" Says, "Of course." At a time like this, I'm not just going to randomly charge you. I was in complete shock. And when I get off the cab, he says to me, "Thanks for coming. We need you here." This was an Israeli Arab from East Jerusalem. This has never happened to me before. So, that's, in a nutshell, what it felt like. I also have to tell you, I was so depressed. Now that I'm back, I think my depression is gone. Because I see what's going on. I know what happened. And I know for a fact that we will not be defeated. I'm worried about the north. That will happen too. But I'm not as depressed as I was. I really being there and feeling the embrace of our people is something that I cannot describe with words. It's beyond understanding. Don't be afraid. We are with them and they are with us. Fighting this war from here means being proud of who we are. And not giving these poster-ripping idiots the chance to feel that they're hurting us in any possible way. Look, we met with the family of two of the hostages. It was horrible. Because they can tell you, we know that the army has to do this. And we cannot have a ceasefire until our hostages are back. Parents of children who are there are telling us this. You understand what I'm saying? But we can't keep praying. We can't stop praying, and we can't stop believing that they will come home. It is so, so painful. One other thing I want to share with you, which you should know, which is very interesting. We heard from one of the, when you go on one of these trips, you get a lot of analysts that speak to you. During the early hours of the war, the Air Force actually responded before the Army did. And they actually bombed the border. There's something called Hannibal Protocol, where they didn't implement where they took Gilad Shalit, but they actually swore to themselves that will implement if it happened again, which is they bombed the area where the hostages are being taken to prevent them from being taken. And there's about 150 people that we have no idea where they are. We don't know if they're in Gaza. We have found no bodies. A lot of these military experts believe that the Hannibal Protocol was actually applied, and then they bombed the border to prevent Hamas from taking more people back. So the more things we'll find out later on, many of them are probably going to shock us. Many of them are going to make us proud. But the one thing I have to tell you is, we can't give up. And we cannot be soft. This is not the time to be soft. Our brothers and sisters are sending their children in harm's way. Our kids are also in harm's way, but not in the same way. We have to stay the course, and we have to fight with them and for them. Am Israel Chai. Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach. And one more thing. I'm thinking of, if time permits and there are enough people, I'm thinking of leading a mission to Israel either at the end of December or beginning of January. Same thing, 6-7 days, very short. So if you're interested in something like that, come and talk to me. I need to know if there's enough people that would like to go, and we're going to try to put it together. I think this is the most important thing we can do, and the most important time for us to be in Israel, that of all time. Shabbat Shalom.